Is Cynthia Hines. I am a veteran of the Armed Forces. I served 11 years in the U.S. Army from 1994 to 2005, and then from 2005 to 2013, I actually worked as a civilian contractor in a combat zone, both in Iraq and Afghanistan.
My name is Shanetta Wilson. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army and Army Reserve. Right now I work at Thresholds with veterans that are homeless or at risk for being homeless. And yeah. So I was in the reserves and I was called up, you know, and my daughter was very small and it was really hard to leave. Where I was really, you know, kind of insulated, I want to say. Thankfully, it's really insulated from what was really going on, like just, you know, a couple of miles away. So you would hear like booms and the, you know, and the shots and things. But I wasn't in the thick of it. I'm thankful that nobody I knew, you know, everybody I knew came, everybody we went out with, we brought back.
Women have served in the military ever since really our founding. During World War II, we had a lot of women who served. There were women who were pilots. There were women who served in administrative medical fields. So we've always had women. In fact, we've had the Waves. That was the Navy branch of the Women's Naval Corps. We've had the WAC, the Women's Army Corps. They no longer exist, but of course, women are just more integrated into the forces.
There would be a lot of women in support roles, like bringing mail, nurses, obviously.
Returning veterans face a lot of challenges. I think one of the big ones is, you know, they've been in service for a long time. They're used to that life of service.
And then, you know, coming back and things aren't how they used to be when you left. Some vets go in right out of high school, you know, really young, and then you're coming out, and that's the only life you know. You have to make so many more decisions than you used to.
People also come back having physical injuries and obviously non-physical injuries, what's known as unseen injuries in terms of mental health issues. They may have been diagnosed with PTSD. They may have a substance abuse problem. They may really be going back into an environment where there's not a VA facility near them.
I think that veterans who experience trauma while they're in the military, whether it's combat trauma or military sexual trauma, have an especially hard time readjusting because no one understands what they're going through.
According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, some 30% of women in the military have been raped or sexually assaulted while serving their country.
Just from the women that I've spoken to who have had art on display in the museum or who have spoken about their experiences with sexual trauma through their artwork, it's such a, sexual trauma is such a major violation of a person on so many levels. But on top of that, to be serving for your country and to enlist yourself in a military position where you want to serve and you want to, you know, do things, and then on top of that, to have someone violate you sexually and sort of take away part of that identity, that is so tremendously hurtful.
And sometimes they come home and they don't have a job to come back to or a family to come back to. And that re-entry to the civilian world can be really unstable, and it can be really difficult for a lot of veterans.
think something that people have to realize is a lot of veterans come from poor or middle class or working class environments. And many of them entered the military from communities where there were not a lot of jobs in the first place.
They often come back very skilled, but what the skills that they come back with aren't necessarily the type of jobs that are available.
Because we have to also realize too that a lot of people join the military, if they, for example, if they join right out of high school, they may not have a lot of experience or maybe no experience in civilian life.
If you know how to work a helicopter, there's not gonna be a million jobs for you when you come back.
Their job is to defend their country's interests, but once that job wraps up, their country has no interest in them any longer. Tens of thousands of American war veterans are simply being discarded.
You have service members that come out of their time in service and they're so skilled. They're leaders and they have really good judgment, and they are really skilled technicians and electricians, and they can do technical things, and they're medics, and they can do all these amazing things, and they come back and they're not qualified for jobs because they don't have the degree or they don't have the certification.
There are a lot of people who are employers who don't know the benefit of hiring a veteran. I know that I've gone on job interviews where people have said, well, you know, I was a little apprehensive about, you know, hiring a vet because, you know, I've heard that they're not as trained or they're hardcore, and this is kind of more of a nice, soft, touchy-feely type of work environment. That roughly 8% of homeless veterans are women. So that's about the same percentage. We're about 12–15% of the force.
I think it's really tragic to know that there is such a large population of our homeless citizens that are veterans who had served.
I feel like homeless veterans are such an invisible population.
I think it's like just awful that those two words are even the same. So that's really sad to me when you see the statistics on how many of the homeless population that you would see in any given major city are veterans.
The problem is that, again, there are certain conditions that, you know, that, for example, that people who are homeless tend to fall under. Substance abuse being an issue, mental health issues being a serious issue.
A lot of times I think it's a psychiatric problems and not having access to service.
I also see that a lot of homeless veterans are reluctant to find services for a number of reasons, for their identity or their pride.
And that's a very common reason as to why there are people who, for mental health reasons, may not be able to hold down a job.
I think that there needs to be lots more housing for military families or veteran families. Even if you have a housing complex or an apartment building that's for homeless veterans, if it's full of men, a woman and her kids might not feel the most comfortable living there.
It's like, well, there's SROs, which is single residence occupancies. That was more like a YMCA, and it was predominantly men. It wasn't really a good atmosphere for families.
I think it's different too because the military was really designed for men, since most of the people that are serving are men. And so you have a system that's more patriarchal, that maybe doesn't see the special needs that women have.
Veterans, I feel that we can do more as a community, but it's not just going to happen from state, city, or federal government agencies like the VA.
There's places like, you know, Thresholds that try to help out with housing, employment, if vets want to go back to school, with education.
We need to do what we can to ensure, like veterans, to ensure that we provide adequate housing. There are people who leave the military with substance abuse issues, who may not understand or who may not have a concept of how expensive it is to have standard housing.
When you're able to connect with veterans who are homeless and offer them support or even a sandwich or a bed for the night, it can be really powerful.
The government, again, can do a better job at transferring skills. One of the problems that you have is that if you were a combat medic in the military, you may have seen things that paramedics just haven't seen, and you may have treated your patients on the battlefield or just trained in such a way where where it's steps ahead or light years ahead of a paramedic.
Our government is given the opportunity, where Congress has been given the opportunity to extend funding or even just to maintain funding for veteran services, whether it be pension, whether it be health care, whether it be just in general looking at the betterment of the lives of our veterans after they serve.
Like if employers did a better job matching what they did in service versus what's available in the civilian world, they would have such a better shot at getting really, really good work when they come home.
But I think in many ways the military can do a lot better job in just working with private industry to see to it that they that people are more marketable.